Ethan Cole was a man who had everything most people could only dream of. His name was known in every business magazine, every luxury circle, and every major city. He was the founder of a global hotel empire worth billions. People called him a genius, a visionary, a man who built an empire with his own hands. But behind all that success, Ethan had slowly built a wall around himself. A wall made of money, pride, and control. Every morning, his day started with perfection. The moment he woke up, his room curtains opened automatically, letting in the golden morning light. His breakfast was served on a silver tray, prepared exactly the way he liked it. Eggs slightly runny, toast perfectly crisp, and black coffee at precisely 72 degrees. He didn't like surprises. Everything in his life followed a system, a pattern. His mansion was more like a palace than a home. Marble floors reflected the light from giant chandeliers. Walls were covered with paintings worth more than most people's lifetime earnings, and classical music softly played through hidden speakers. The house staff moved quietly, carefully, almost afraid to make a sound. They all knew how particular Ethan was about order. Despite his wealth, Ethan wasn't cruel, but he was distant. To him, emotions were distractions, and empathy was a weakness. He respected only one thing: success. Anyone who failed to keep up with his standards quickly lost his trust. Among his staff was a woman named Maria. She had worked for him for more than 10 years. She was quiet, loyal, and extremely hardworking. Maria never complained, even when she worked extra hours. Ethan appreciated her dedication but rarely spoke to her. To him, she was just part of the system that kept his world running smoothly, like another piece of furniture that did its job perfectly. Maria lived a simple life. She came early every morning, did her work, and went home late. Her hands were always busy, her eyes always down. Yet behind that calm, tired face was a mother's heart, full of love and sacrifice. She had a teenage daughter named Lena, whom she raised alone after her husband passed away years ago. Lena was her only joy, her only reason to keep going. During summer vacations, Maria would sometimes bring Lena with her to the mansion because she couldn't afford to leave her alone at home. Ethan never minded, as long as the girl didn't disturb anyone. He hardly noticed her presence at all. But Lena was different from the people who lived in that grand house. She didn't care about expensive art, gold frames, or crystal lights. What fascinated her most was movement, rhythm, dance. Whenever she heard music, her body naturally followed the beat. She didn't have formal training, but her soul spoke through every motion. She would often sit quietly in a corner while her mother worked, listening to the faint piano music that played in the background. Sometimes, when the garden was empty, she would dance, barefoot, free, and full of life. The flowers, the wind, and even the sunlight seemed to move with her. She didn't dance to impress anyone. She danced because it made her feel alive. One day, while walking through the garden talking on his phone, Ethan happened to see her. She was spinning gracefully on the grass, her hair flowing in the sunlight. For a moment he stopped, curious. But as he watched, his lips curved into a small, amused smile. To him, it looked like nothing more than a child's playful act, raw, unpolished, not real talent. He shook his head slightly, muttering, "People waste their time on such things," before walking away. He didn't realize that in that brief moment, he had looked down upon something pure, something money could never buy. That evening, as Ethan attended an elegant dinner party at his mansion, surrounded by investors and artists, the topic of true talent came up. A famous choreographer mentioned how natural emotion in dance could be more powerful than training. Ethan disagreed instantly. "Emotion is cheap," he said confidently. "What matters is perfection, control, and polish. Anyone can move, but not everyone can perform." The guests laughed and nodded, agreeing with him because no one dared to argue with a billionaire in his own house. Maria quietly served drinks, her heart pounding as she overheard the conversation. She knew how much her daughter loved to dance, and hearing Ethan's cold words made her uneasy. She glanced at Lena, who stood by the door, listening too. Lena didn't seem angry, just thoughtful, almost like she was making a promise to herself. In Ethan's world, money could measure everything: success, beauty, skill, even respect. But what he didn't know was that soon, something would happen that money couldn't measure. Something would make him question everything he believed about talent and worth. That night, Ethan looked out from his balcony, admiring the city lights that stretched beyond his mansion. He felt powerful, untouchable, as if the world belonged to him. Yet, in the servants' small quarters behind the grand house, Lena danced quietly under a single flickering light bulb, unaware that her steps were about to change both their lives forever. Lena was a simple girl with big dreams hidden inside her small heart. She had grown up watching her mother work long hours, often coming home tired but still smiling. Life had never given them luxury or comfort, but it had given them love, and that was enough for Lena. She never complained about the small room they lived in or the second-hand clothes she wore. She only wanted one thing: to dance. From the moment she could walk, she loved to move with music. When her mother cooked, Lena would dance around the kitchen. When rain fell outside, she would dance in the puddles, laughing. She didn't have a teacher or fancy shoes, but her heart understood rhythm. Music spoke to her soul in a language she didn't need words for. Whenever her mother brought her to the billionaire's mansion, Lena felt like she had stepped into another world. Everything there was shiny and perfect: marble floors, golden frames, sparkling chandeliers. But even in that world of wealth, she didn't feel jealous. She was fascinated. She liked how big the garden was, how soft the grass felt under her feet. It became her secret dance floor. While her mother worked cleaning rooms, polishing tables, and ironing clothes, Lena would quietly explore the corners of the mansion she was allowed to visit. She never touched anything, never caused trouble. But when no one was around, she would take out her small music player, one her mother had saved up for months to buy, and play her favorite songs. Then, in the middle of the garden, she would dance freely, without fear or shyness. Her movements weren't perfect. Her shoes were worn out and sometimes she stumbled. But she had something no professional dancer could copy: emotion. Every step came from her heart. Every spin told a story. Her mother often watched from a distance, tired but proud, whispering to herself, "That girl is meant for something bigger." But not everyone saw what Maria saw. One sunny afternoon, Lena was dancing in the garden, lost in her own world. She didn't notice Ethan Cole, the billionaire, walking by while talking on his phone. When his call ended, he stopped for a moment and looked at her. Her dress twirled as she spun, her face glowing with pure joy. For a brief second, Ethan almost smiled, but then he shook his head. To him, it looked silly. Just a poor girl wasting her time pretending to be a dancer. He chuckled under his breath and said softly, "Cute, but useless." Then he walked away. Lena didn't hear him, but Maria, who was trimming flowers nearby, did. Her heart sank. She knew Ethan wasn't a cruel man, but he didn't understand what it meant to dream when you had nothing. That evening, she warned her daughter, "Lena, don't dance where Mr. Cole can see you. He won't understand." Lena nodded but said nothing. She wasn't angry. She just kept thinking maybe one day he will. A few days later, the mansion was full of guests. Expensive cars lined the driveway, and laughter echoed through the halls. Ethan was hosting a dinner party for investors and artists. Lena helped her mother carry trays to the dining room. She was careful not to drop anything, but her heart beat fast. Not from fear, but from curiosity. She loved watching people. The women's glittering dresses, the men's confident smiles. Everything seemed like a story from another world. At one point, the guests began talking about art and talent. One of them mentioned how true talent doesn't always come from money or training. Ethan laughed loudly and said, "Nonsense. Real talent requires skill, discipline, and education. You can't just wake up and decide to be great." Someone jokingly said, "Like that little maid's daughter you mentioned the other day? The one who dances in your garden?" The guests laughed, and Ethan smirked. "Yes, that one," he said. "If that girl can impress me with her dance, I'll give her $100 million. The whole table burst into laughter. To them, it was just a funny moment, a rich man's exaggeration. But one person in the room wasn't laughing. Lena had been standing at the doorway, holding a tray, and she heard every word. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't cry. She just looked at Ethan, the man who believed everything had a price, and something inside her heart whispered, "I'll show you that not everything can be bought." When the party ended, Maria found Lena sitting quietly in the small staff room. Her mother sighed, sitting beside her. "Don't take it seriously, my dear. He didn't mean it. He was only joking." Lena looked at her mother and smiled softly. "I know, Mama, but maybe it's time I show him what real dancing looks like." Maria's eyes widened. "No, Lena, don't embarrass yourself. These people, they live in a different world." But Lena shook her head. "That doesn't mean I can't let them see mine." That night, while the mansion slept, Lena went to the garden. The moon was bright, the air cool and quiet. She turned on her little music player and started to dance. This time, her movements were stronger, more emotional. Every spin, every step was filled with determination. She wasn't dancing for applause or money. She was dancing for her own dignity, for every person who had ever been looked down upon just because they were poor. From a window upstairs, Maria watched her daughter silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. She saw something Ethan never did. Not just a girl dancing, but a soul burning with passion. Lena's heart whispered again and again, "One day, he will see me. One day, he will understand." That night was the beginning of something she didn't even realize. The start of a journey that would change both her life and the life of the billionaire forever. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with talk about the previous night's party. The guests had left, but their laughter and gossip still floated in the air. The words Ethan had spoken, "If that girl can impress me, I'll give her $100 million, became a joke among the servants. Some laughed quietly, others shook their heads, saying, "The boss was just showing off again." But for Lena, those words were not a joke. They had settled deep inside her heart. She kept hearing them again and again, like an echo. "If that girl can impress me." It wasn't the money that caught her attention. It was the way he said that girl, as if she were invisible, unimportant, incapable of doing anything great. All morning, she watched her mother working, polishing furniture, serving breakfast, moving quietly like she always did. Maria noticed her daughter's silence and asked softly, "What are you thinking, my love?" Lena looked up with determination in her eyes. "I'm thinking I will take his challenge." Maria almost dropped the tray in shock. "What?" "Lena, no, you can't. He was joking. Don't you understand? He didn't mean it." "I know," Lena said calmly, "but I do. He may have said it as a joke, but I'll make it real." Maria's heart filled with fear. She knew her daughter had courage, but she also knew how cruel the world could be to dreamers. "People like him don't understand us," she said. "If you try and fail, they'll laugh at you." Lena smiled sadly. "Then let them laugh, Mama. I've been invisible my whole life. At least if they laugh, they'll finally see me." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything her mother had gone through. All the hard work, all the sacrifices, all the times people had looked down on her because she was a maid. She didn't want pity. She wanted to prove that worth was not written on your clothes or your background. It lived inside your heart. The next morning, she woke up early, even before her mother. She went to the small garden behind the mansion, where she always danced in secret. But this time it was different. This time, she wasn't just dancing for herself. She was dancing for every dreamer who had been laughed at. The sun was barely up, and the grass was still wet with dew. Lena turned on her little music player and began to move. Her body felt light, but her heart was heavy with emotion. Every step was filled with meaning, the pain of being looked down upon, the hope of rising, the fire of belief. She fell a few times but stood back up, wiping her tears and trying again. She practiced for hours every single day. The mansion staff began to notice her effort. At first, they whispered among themselves, thinking she was wasting her time. But as days passed, they started watching her practice in silence. Her movements grew stronger, her balance more perfect. The gardener, the cook, even the security guard would stop for a moment to watch. Something about her spirit touched everyone's heart. One afternoon, the cook, Mrs. Helen, brought her a glass of juice. "You're working hard, dear," she said kindly. "What are you training for?" Lena smiled. "To show Mr. Cole that he was wrong." Helen looked at her with surprise. "Wrong about what?" "That dreams don't belong only to the rich." Word spread through the staff. Soon everyone in the mansion knew that the maid's daughter was preparing to dance for the billionaire. Some said it was brave, others said it was foolish, but deep down they all wanted her to win. Not for the money, but for pride. Meanwhile, Ethan remained unaware of what was happening. He was busy with his meetings, phone calls, and travel plans. To him, the joke he had made at the party was already forgotten. He had no idea that his words had started a fire in the heart of a young girl who refused to be defined by her circumstances. One evening, as Ethan walked through the main hall, he noticed a group of his employees whispering and smiling near the garden. He frowned. "What's going on?" he asked sharply. The butler hesitated. "Sir, it's the maid's daughter. She's been dancing lately. The staff likes watching her." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Dancing? Again?" "Yes, sir. She said something about your challenge." Ethan blinked in confusion for a moment, then laughed loudly. "My challenge? Oh, that ridiculous thing from the party." "Yes, sir," the butler replied quietly. Ethan shook his head, amused. "Let her play. If she wants to pretend, let her. Maybe it will teach her that life isn't a fairy tale." But as he walked away, something inside him felt oddly curious. Why would a poor maid's daughter take his joke so seriously? The next few days, Lena's preparation grew even more intense. Her feet ached, her legs trembled, and sometimes her body screamed for rest, but she didn't stop. Every night, her mother would bring her food and beg, "Please, Lena, enough. You'll only get hurt." But Lena's answer never changed. "Mama, I have to do this. Not to win money, to win respect." There were moments when she doubted herself. Sometimes she'd stare at her reflection in the window, wondering if she was foolish to believe she could impress a man who valued perfection more than heart. But then she remembered his mocking smile and the laughter of the guests, and it reignited her determination. As the days passed, her confidence grew. The once shy, quiet girl had turned into someone strong, someone ready to stand in front of the world and say, "I matter too." Maria finally stopped trying to stop her. Instead, she began helping her, mending her old dress, cleaning her shoes, and watching her daughter's every move with tears of pride. The mansion servants began whispering a different kind of story now, not about a poor girl's foolish dream, but about a brave girl's courage. And deep down, everyone was waiting for the day she would finally stand in front of the man who laughed at her, and dance like the world was watching. Lena didn't know when or how it would happen, but she knew one thing for sure. She was ready. The sun had barely risen, but Lena was already awake. She stood in front of the small mirror in her mother's room, her reflection still half hidden by the dim morning light. Her hair was tied back, her face calm but determined. Every morning now started the same way, with a silent promise to herself. "I will not stop until I prove him wrong." The mansion was quiet at that hour. Most of the workers hadn't arrived yet, and Ethan Cole was still asleep in his luxurious bedroom. The garden outside was covered in dew, the air cool and soft. Lena stepped out quietly, holding her small music player close to her chest. She placed it on a stone bench, pressed play, and closed her eyes. As the music began, she let her body move. Every step, every spin, every wave of her hands told a story. Her dance wasn't perfect. Sometimes she stumbled, sometimes her timing missed a beat, but there was life in her movements, something raw and real. It was as if she was pouring her entire soul into every motion. Her mother, Maria, stood at a distance, watching silently. At first, she didn't understand why Lena was so stubborn about it. To Maria, this wasn't just about dance. It was about a challenge that could end in humiliation. But as she watched her daughter practice every morning, rain or shine, she began to see something else: strength. the kind of strength she herself never had the chance to show. At night, when everyone slept, Maria would quietly prepare things for her daughter's practice. She mended Lena's worn-out shoes, ironed her simple white dress, and cleaned the little speaker that had become her most precious possession. She never said it aloud, but she had started to believe in her daughter's dream too. Lena practiced in secret for almost 2 weeks. The staff slowly began to notice. The gardener, old Mr. Lewis, often paused his work to watch her. "You've got fire in you, girl," he said one morning. "Don't let anyone put it out." The cook, Helen, brought her extra food, saying, "You'll need your strength if you're going to dance for that proud man." Even the driver, who rarely spoke to anyone, started bringing her music suggestions from his phone. Slowly, everyone in the mansion began rooting for her. She had become a small spark of hope in a place that usually only followed orders. But despite the growing support, Lena knew one thing: she couldn't afford to fail. Every night before sleeping, she remembered the way Ethan had laughed at her, the way the guests had joined in, treating her like a joke. That memory hurt, but it also fueled her. She wanted to show them that true talent didn't need a stage, fame, or money. It only needed heart. One afternoon, while she was practicing, Ethan passed by the window and caught a glimpse of her again. This time, he didn't stop. He just rolled his eyes slightly and muttered, "Still wasting time." He didn't realize that the same girl he thought foolish was training harder than most professionals ever did. A few days later, Lena found an old video online, a performance by a world-famous dancer. She watched it again and again, studying every move, trying to understand rhythm, balance, and emotion. She didn't have a teacher, but she had determination, and that became her greatest guide. Her body began to ache from all the long hours. Her feet blistered, her muscles burned, but she didn't stop. When pain came, she smiled through it, whispering, "One day, it will all be worth it." Maria worried constantly. "You'll get sick, Lena. Please rest." But Lena would shake her head gently. "Mom, I'm not tired. I feel alive." One night, when rain poured heavily outside, she still went out to the garden. The grass was slippery, her clothes soaked, but she danced anyway. Her movements were wild and emotional, filled with freedom and defiance. The rain washed away her tears, but she kept going, each step echoing her promise to never give up. From one of the upper windows, a maid who couldn't sleep watched her quietly. The next morning, she told everyone what she saw. The maid's daughter was dancing in the rain like an angel. Soon, even those who had doubted Lena began to believe something special was happening. The mansion that once felt cold and strict now had a strange warmth to it. The workers whispered stories of Lena's determination. Some said she was foolish, others said she was brave, but all agreed she had a heart bigger than her circumstances. Then, one evening, Ethan announced another grand dinner at the mansion, one even more important than the last. Business partners, artists, politicians, everyone who mattered would be there. When Lena heard this, she felt her heart race. Maybe this was her moment. Maybe this was the time she had been waiting for. Her mother panicked when she heard what Lena planned to do. "Lena, please, these are powerful people. If you dance in front of them, and they laugh at you." Lena placed her hand on her mother's arm and said softly, "If I don't dance, I'll always regret it. You taught me to stand tall no matter what." Maria couldn't stop her. Deep inside, she knew her daughter's spirit was stronger than her fear. So, instead of arguing, she helped her prepare. Together, they cleaned her white dress, fixed the small tears, and tied her hair neatly. When Lena looked at herself in the mirror that night, she didn't see a poor maid's daughter. She saw a dancer ready to face the world. On the evening of the dinner, the mansion glittered with lights, laughter, and music. Guests in elegant clothes filled the hall. Ethan stood at the center, confident as always. He didn't know that outside, in the hallway, a young girl in a simple white dress was waiting for the right moment to step in, to turn his joke into a lesson he would never forget. Lena took a deep breath, feeling her heart pound like a drum. "This is it," she whispered. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. She wasn't there for money. She wasn't there for revenge. She was there to prove that no matter how rich or powerful someone is, they can never measure the worth of a dream. That night, she was ready. Ready to dance. Ready to be seen. Ready to make the world fall silent. The evening arrived, glowing with luxury and excitement. The mansion was alive with laughter, music, and the soft clinking of glasses. Expensive cars lined the driveway, and guests dressed in glittering gowns and sharp suits stepped out one by one. It was another one of Ethan Cole's grand dinner parties, the kind of event where everyone wanted to be seen, and everything had to be perfect. Inside, the hall sparkled with crystal lights. Waiters moved gracefully, carrying trays of golden drinks and delicate food. A live orchestra played soft tunes in the background. Ethan stood near the entrance, greeting his guests with his usual charming smile. He looked powerful, confident, and completely unaware that tonight, his world was about to change. Maria worked in the background as always, helping the other staff set the tables and serve drinks. But her hands trembled slightly that night. She kept glancing toward the back door, where her daughter Lena stood hidden in the shadows, waiting. Lena wore the same simple white dress her mother had stitched for her, freshly washed and carefully ironed. Her shoes were clean but old, her hair tied neatly. Her heart was racing so fast she could hear it over the music. She wasn't nervous because of the rich people or the shining lights. She was nervous because she knew this was the moment she had dreamed about for weeks. From behind the curtain, she watched Ethan. He laughed and joked with his friends, completely unaware of her presence. For a brief moment, she remembered his words. If that girl can impress me, I'll give her $100 million. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, I don't need your money. I just need you to see me. As the dinner went on, a few guests started discussing art and talent again. One man mentioned a young dancer he had discovered recently, and Ethan laughed. Ah, dance, he said confidently. It's an art that takes years of training. It's not something you learn by twirling around in a garden. Those words burned in Lena's chest like fire. She clenched her hands tightly. Maria, who overheard the comment, felt her heart sink. But before she could stop her daughter, Lena stepped out from the shadows. The room went silent for a moment. All eyes turned to the young girl standing at the edge of the hall. The orchestra paused. Ethan looked surprised, his brows raised. What's this? He asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Lena took a deep breath and said softly but clearly, Mr. Cole, I heard what you said before. You told your guests that if I can impress you with my dance, you'd give me $100 million. I'm not here for the money. I just want to show you what real dance looks like. The guests exchanged curious glances. Some smiled mockingly, others whispered among themselves. But no one stopped her. Ethan folded his arms, smiling slightly. All right then, he said. Go ahead. Let's see this performance. Maria's heart pounded as her daughter stepped into the center of the room. She wanted to run and stop her, but something held her back. Maybe faith, maybe fear, maybe both. Lena closed her eyes for a moment. The butler, feeling sympathy, turned on the small speaker she had brought. The music began, soft and haunting, slowly filling the room. And then, she started to dance. Her movements were gentle at first, like waves brushing the shore. Every step was graceful, filled with emotion. As the music grew stronger, her body followed, telling a story of pain, courage, and dreams. She spun across the marble floor, her white dress flowing like light itself. The air in the hall seemed to change. The laughter stopped, the whispers faded. Even the orchestra members watched her in silence. Her dance wasn't about technique or perfect moves. It was about feeling. Every gesture carried meaning. The way she stretched her arms, the way her feet moved softly yet powerfully, the way her eyes shone with passion. She wasn't just performing. She was speaking through motion, telling everyone in that room what words could never say. For Ethan, it was confusing at first. He had seen hundreds of professional performers before, people trained in the best studios. But there was something different about this girl. The way she danced wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was pure, honest. There was something raw in her movements that touched something deep inside him. Something he hadn't felt in years. The song built to its final note. Lena spun one last time, her arms open, her eyes closed, her face glowing with tears and light. The music ended. Silence filled the hall. No one clapped. No one spoke. For a moment, time seemed frozen. Then slowly, people began to stand. One woman wiped her eyes. Another guest whispered, "That was beautiful." The silence turned into soft applause, then louder, until the whole room was clapping. But Lena didn't smile. She just stood there, breathing heavily, her eyes searching for Ethan's face. He was still seated, motionless, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. For a man who thought money could buy anything, that moment shattered his belief. He had seen thousands of performances, but none had ever made his chest tighten like this. It wasn't about beauty or skill. It was about truth. This girl had danced from her soul, and he knew it. Finally, Ethan stood up. Everyone turned toward him, waiting to see what he would say. He walked slowly to the center of the hall, stopping in front of Lena. She looked down, afraid he might mock her again. But when he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You win," he said softly. "Not because of a challenge, not because of money, but because you reminded me what real art is." Maria, standing near the doorway, covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. The staff in the background smiled proudly. Ethan looked around at his guests and said, "This girl has something none of us can buy, heart." Lena looked up at him, her eyes shining with emotion. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. In that moment, everyone in the room knew. The maid's daughter had done something no one expected. She had made a billionaire silent. The applause began again, louder than before, echoing through the grand hall. But for Lena, the sound didn't matter. What mattered was the look on Ethan's face, the look of respect. That night, she walked back to her mother, smiling through her tears. "He saw me, Mama," she whispered. "He finally saw me." And Maria hugged her tight, whispering back, "Yes, my love, you danced your way into his heart, and into the world." For a long moment after the applause faded, the grand hall was completely silent again. The echo of Lena's last dance steps still hung in the air like a soft memory. People stood frozen, unsure what to say or do next. The billionaire, Ethan Cole, looked at the young girl before him, not as a maid's daughter anymore, but as something far greater. His proud smile was gone. Instead, there was a look of realization, almost shame, in his eyes. He had spent his whole life surrounded by wealth, power, and people who praised him. Yet, tonight, a girl who owned nothing but her courage had managed to humble him. The weight of that truth sat heavy on his heart. Lena stood quietly, breathing deeply. Her feet ached. Her dress clung to her from the effort, but her eyes were calm and bright. She didn't know what would happen next. She had danced from her heart, not for money or applause, but to prove that even someone small, someone invisible, could still shine. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "What's your name, child?" "Lena," she said softly. "Lena," he repeated, almost to himself. "You've given me something tonight that no one in this room could buy. I don't know whether to thank you or apologize." The guests watched in silence. They had never seen Ethan speak like this before. Not with pride or arrogance, but with honesty. Maria stood near the back, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't know whether to smile or cry. Her daughter had just done something she never dared to dream of. She had touched the heart of a man who had everything but compassion. Ethan turned toward her. "Maria," he said softly, "come forward." She hesitated, then stepped closer, bowing her head respectfully. "Yes, sir." He looked at both of them, the maid and her daughter, and said, "You've worked in my house for years, and I never once asked about your life. I only saw you as staff. Tonight I see much more. I see strength, dignity, and talent that deserves the world stage." Maria didn't know how to respond. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. He smiled slightly and looked back at Lena. "You said you didn't want the money. But you deserve it, not as a reward, but as an opportunity. I want to sponsor your education, your dance training, whatever you need. The world should see your gift." A gasp ran through the crowd. This was the billionaire everyone knew for his sharp business mind and cold attitude. And now he was offering help to a maid's daughter in front of everyone. But Lena shook her head gently. "Thank you, sir, but I don't need your money. I just wanted you to understand that talent can come from anywhere, even from people you never notice." Her words were pure, simple, but they hit Ethan harder than anything he'd heard in years. He stood silent, realizing how true they were. For a man who believed money could solve everything, this girl had shown him that real worth had nothing to do with wealth. The guests began murmuring softly, some clapping again, others nodding in admiration. Many were moved. They had come to a dinner party but ended up witnessing something life-changing. Ethan raised his hand slightly to quiet the room. "Then, Lena," he said sincerely, "if you will not take money, at least let me give you my respect. From this day forward, you will always be welcome in this house. Not as staff, but as a guest." Lena blinked in surprise. Maria covered her mouth, unable to hold back her tears. She had worked for him for years, always quietly, always humbly. And now, because of her daughter's courage, their lives had changed forever. Ethan then turned to the guests. "Let tonight be a reminder," he said firmly, "that true talent, true beauty, true art, they have no class, no status, and no price. Sometimes, greatness hides in the most unexpected places." The hall filled with applause again. Not just polite clapping, but heartfelt appreciation. People were cheering, not for the billionaire, but for the young girl who had taught them all a lesson in humility and heart. Lena smiled softly, her eyes glistening. She felt proud, but more than that, she felt free. For so long, she had lived in the shadow of her mother's work, watching people look down on them. Tonight, she had shown everyone, including herself, that she was more than what the world saw. After the party ended, many guests came up to speak with her. One woman, a famous dance instructor, said with a warm smile, "My dear, you have something rare. You don't just dance, you make people feel. That's what real art is." Lena thanked her politely, still trying to process everything that had happened. Ethan came to her one last time before leaving the hall. "You reminded me tonight of something I lost long ago," he said quietly. "When I was young, I used to paint. I loved it. But when I became rich, I forgot what it felt like to create from the heart. You brought that memory back." She smiled shyly. "Maybe you should paint again." He chuckled, nodding. "Maybe I will." As the last guests left, the hall slowly returned to silence. The lights dimmed, and the orchestra packed up their instruments. Maria took her daughter's hand, and together they walked out into the cool night air. The stars shone brightly above them, and for the first time in a long while, Maria felt light. "You did it, my love," she whispered. Lena looked up at the sky and smiled. "No, Mama, we did it." Ethan stood at the window of his mansion, watching them leave. Something inside him had changed that night. A wall he didn't even know existed had broken. He realized that respect couldn't be demanded with money. It had to be earned through understanding and kindness. As he turned away from the window, he saw the empty dance floor where she had stood just an hour ago. He could almost still see her spinning, her dress flowing, her face glowing with passion. He smiled to himself and said quietly, "The maid's daughter. What a remarkable girl." That night, the billionaire couldn't sleep. For the first time, it wasn't because of deals or numbers. It was because a simple girl had reminded him that even the richest man could still have something to learn. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of his mansion, painting the room in soft gold. But his mind wasn't on business deals or meetings as it usually was. Instead, his thoughts were still on the maid's daughter, Lena. Her dance, her courage, her words. They had replayed in his head all night like a song that refused to fade. He sat by the window with his coffee untouched. For years, he had measured everything in life by profit, how much something was worth, how much it could earn him. But now, he was realizing that some things couldn't be measured at all. There was no price for heart, no currency for truth. He thought about how he had laughed at her, how carelessly he had made that joke about the $100 million. At the time, it was just entertainment, something to amuse his guests. But now he felt a deep regret. How many people had he looked down on before? How many talented souls had he ignored because they weren't important enough? The questions wouldn't stop echoing in his head. Downstairs, the mansion was quiet. Most of the staff had not yet arrived, except for Maria. She entered the kitchen softly, not expecting to see anyone so early. But when she walked in, she was shocked to see Ethan already there, standing by the counter with a thoughtful expression. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said nervously, lowering her eyes. He turned to her, offering a faint smile. "Good morning, Maria. Please, sit down." She hesitated. "Sir." He pulled out a chair for her. "Please, I need to talk to you." Maria sat slowly, still unsure what to expect. Ethan looked at her for a moment, then said quietly, "Last night changed something in me. I realized how wrong I've been. You've worked here for years, but I never saw you, not really. I only saw the work you did, not the person you are." Maria's eyes widened slightly. No employer had ever spoken to her that way before. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. He nodded. "Your daughter, she's extraordinary. The way she danced, the way she carried herself. It reminded me that greatness doesn't come from wealth. It comes from courage." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. "She only wanted to make you see that," she said softly. "She never wanted money. She just wanted to be respected." Ethan nodded again, taking a deep breath. "And she succeeded. That's why I want to help her. But not with money she refuses. I want to help her build something of her own." Maria looked confused. "What do you mean, sir?" He smiled slightly. "I want to open a dance foundation. A place where children from poor families can learn, perform, and dream. No fees, no judgment. Just opportunity. And I want Lena to be the first student." Maria gasped softly. She covered her mouth, trying not to cry. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said warmly. "Because it's time I do something that actually matters." Later that day, Ethan called his personal assistant and began making calls. Not for business deals, but for something new. He contacted architects, teachers, and dance professionals. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about profit margins or investors. He was thinking about purpose. News of the Cole Foundation for the Arts spread quickly. People were shocked that the cold-hearted billionaire had suddenly turned his focus to charity. Many thought it was a publicity stunt. But those who had been at the party knew better. They had seen the change in his eyes. Meanwhile, Maria told Lena everything. They were sitting in their small apartment, the same one where they had lived for years. When she shared Ethan's plan, Lena's mouth fell open. "He's really doing that?" she whispered. Maria nodded, smiling proudly through her tears. "Yes, my love. You touched his heart." Lena couldn't believe it. Just days ago, she had been invisible, a servant's daughter, laughed at by the rich. And now, her small act of courage had started something that could change hundreds of lives. She felt proud, but also humbled. "Mama," she said softly, "if this helps other children like me, then it's all worth it." Days turned into weeks. Ethan visited construction sites, met with community leaders, and personally reviewed designs for the new academy. The place would have wide dance halls, music rooms, and open gardens, a space for creativity and hope. He even decided to build it near one of the poorer neighborhoods so children could walk there easily. When Lena and Maria visited the site for the first time, Ethan was already there, wearing a simple shirt instead of his usual expensive suit. He smiled when he saw them. "Welcome," he said warmly. "This is where it all begins." Lena looked around in awe. The building wasn't finished yet, but she could already imagine it. Children laughing, dancing, learning. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "And it's yours as much as it is mine." She smiled shyly. "I'm not sure I deserve that." He shook his head. "You do. Because this all started with you. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A quiet understanding. He had been her mocker once, but now he was her supporter. The man who had laughed at her had learned from her instead. Months later, when the academy finally opened, the hall was filled with families, children, and media reporters. Ethan gave a short speech, but instead of boasting about donations or success, he simply said, "One young girl reminded me that talent knows no class. Today, this foundation exists because of her." He gestured to Lena, who was standing beside her mother. The crowd turned to her and began to applaud. She blushed and lowered her eyes, but inside, her heart glowed with pride. That night, as the lights dimmed and the guests left, Ethan looked around the new building and smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt truly rich, not because of what he owned, but because of what he had given. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that the dance which had left him speechless had also given him back something he had lost long ago. His humanity. The opening day of the dance academy felt like a dream come true. The sun shone bright, and laughter filled the air. Children ran around the courtyard, some barefoot, some holding their parents' hands. They were from all kinds of families, poor, middle class, some even orphans, but they all shared one thing: hope. Ethan stood near the entrance, watching them with a quiet smile. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, he had been the kind of man who only cared about money, reputation, and business. Now, he found happiness in the sound of children's laughter instead of applause from investors. For the first time in his life, he felt peaceful. Maria and Lena arrived together. Lena was wearing a simple white dress again, the same one she had worn on the night she danced in his mansion. Only this time, it wasn't a symbol of humility. It was a symbol of pride. When Ethan saw her, his eyes softened. "Lena," he said warmly, "welcome home." She smiled shyly. "It's beautiful, sir. I never imagined this place would become real." "It's real because of you," Ethan said. "You reminded me that dreams don't need permission from the world. They just need courage." The ceremony began. There was no fancy ribbon cutting, no expensive fireworks. Instead, a group of children performed a short dance that Lena had helped choreograph. Their movements weren't perfect, but their faces glowed with joy. Every step was full of heart. Ethan clapped harder than anyone else, his eyes shining with emotion. When the performance ended, Ethan stepped forward to speak. His voice was calm, sincere, and full of feeling. "A long time ago," he said, "I thought wealth was the only thing that gave life meaning. I believed success was about what you own. But a young girl taught me that real success is about what you share. This academy is not just a building. It's a promise. A promise that talent, no matter where it's born, will always have a place to shine." Everyone clapped. Maria wiped her eyes proudly as she looked at her daughter. For years, she had scrubbed floors and cleaned rooms in silence, never imagining that one day her child would stand as the reason behind something so beautiful. After the event, people came up to Lena, congratulating her, asking her about her dance, her story. She smiled politely, but her heart was humble. She didn't want fame or praise. She only wanted others to feel what she had felt that night when she danced. Freedom. Later that afternoon, when most of the guests had left, Ethan, Maria, and Lena sat together in the garden behind the academy. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the open windows. Birds sang in the trees above them, and a soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Ethan looked at them both and said quietly, "I owe you an apology, not just for how I treated you, but for how I lived. I used to think kindness was weakness. I was wrong. You showed me that kindness is strength." Maria shook her head gently. "No, sir. The fact that you changed means you already found that strength inside you." He smiled, touched by her words. "Maybe, but I couldn't have done it without you too." Lena looked around at the academy, the wide dance hall, the children practicing inside, and whispered, "Mama, it feels like a dream." Maria nodded. "It's more than a dream, my love. It's a new beginning." As days turned into weeks, the academy flourished. Every morning, children arrived with excitement. Some were shy at first, unsure of themselves. But Lena, now teaching part-time under professional trainers, encouraged them gently. She taught them not just how to move, but how to feel the music, to express who they were. The local newspapers began writing about the academy. They called it the Dance of Hope. People from nearby cities donated instruments, shoes, and clothes for the students. It became a symbol of inspiration, proof that compassion could build something greater than money ever could. One afternoon, while Lena was teaching a young boy how to balance during a spin, Ethan stood quietly at the door watching. The boy stumbled, then laughed, and Lena joined in. Ethan smiled to himself. He had never had children, never had a family, but in that moment, he realized he had something even better: purpose. When Lena noticed him standing there, she waved him over. "Come join us, Mr. Cole," she said cheerfully. He chuckled. "I don't think I'm much of a dancer." The children giggled. One of them said, "Come on, sir. You can try." Ethan hesitated, but then stepped forward, pretending to take a dancer's pose. The children laughed and clapped. For the first time, the billionaire who once stood above everyone was now dancing among them, completely free of pride. As he moved awkwardly but happily, Lena laughed and said, "See? Even you can dance, sir." He smiled widely. "Only because I had the best teacher." That simple moment, the laughter, the music, the sunlight, captured everything he had learned. Life wasn't about being admired. It was about being human. Months later, on the anniversary of the Academy's opening, a huge event was held. The students performed beautifully, their energy lighting up the stage. When the final performance ended, Ethan gave a short speech once again. But this time, his words were directed straight to Lena. "You once danced for me," he said, his voice soft but clear, "and you made me speechless. But today, you've given a voice to hundreds of children who might never have been heard. That is your true legacy." The audience applauded loudly, and Lena smiled, tears of joy shining in her eyes. Maria stood beside her, holding her hand tightly. That night, after everyone had left, Ethan stood outside under the stars. Lena joined him quietly. "Thank you," she said, "for believing in us." He looked at her kindly. "No, Lena, thank you for teaching me to believe again." They stood in silence, looking up at the sky. The moonlight reflected on the academy windows, and the sound of distant laughter floated through the air. Ethan finally said, "You know, when you danced that night, I thought you changed my life. But now I realize you saved it." Lena smiled softly. "Sometimes all a person needs is a little reminder of what matters most." He nodded. "And you gave me that reminder." As the night grew quiet, a gentle peace settled over them. The man who once mocked the maid's daughter had become her greatest admirer and friend, and the girl who was once invisible had become a light for countless others. Their story had come full circle, from laughter that hurt to dance that healed. And in that quiet moment, under the stars, both of them knew that this was not the end. It was just the beginning of something beautiful. A life built not on wealth or status, but on respect, kindness, and heart.